Good morning to all my fellow teachers, department chairperson, and every subject, to our head teacher 3, Madam Mercedes Siagpawa, and to our ever supportive Madam Principal Fabian Kagawan. Today I am tasked to discuss assessment strategies, tips, and tools that can help us during this new normal. I would like to begin by showing you this picture. In this picture, the child was asked, "What did you learn in school today?" What was the student's response? Tama po. She just bubbles about how she answered her exam. What can we learn from the picture? You can answer po kahit sa isip niyo lang. Or you can share your insights in the chat box. I think you will agree po that learning is not how good our students are in taking their exam or how high their scores in the exam. It has to be more than that. That's why for us teachers, understanding assessment is very important, especially now that we have a new learning setup. As we shift into distance modular learning with different modalities, what are the challenges we encounter? What are the questions we usually hear from our learners and parents? Hindi po ba questions like, how do we assess? What are the tools we can use? Can we have a cheat-proof assessment? So, what can we do now? We should reflect. We should rethink. What are our practices and strategies for assessment? Some of our practices, or most of our practices, will certainly shift. What may be effective before in the face-to-face learning may not be applicable anymore with our current situation, or maybe we have to learn new approaches. Let us again revisit how assessment was defined. This definition is not only true for traditional setup of instruction. This is also true for our new normal setup of learning. According to DepEd Order Number 8, Series of 2015, assessment is the ongoing process of identifying, gathering, organizing, and interpreting quantitative and qualitative information about what learners know and can do. Meaning, there is a continuity. Ano po ba ang involved sa process? Collecting information, interpreting this information, and making judgment, or it involves decision making. For what? Para po saan? For us to know the student's level of achievement and for us to analyze and evaluate our own quality of teaching. The next question is, what is the purpose of our assessment? I think we are all familiar with this assessment of learning and assessment for learning. What is the difference? Assessment of learning is summative in nature. Normally, it is related to standardized tests, while assessment for learning is focused on the teaching and learning process. Its goal is to make constant adjustment to our instructional strategy. Bakit po kailangan alam natin ang difference with these two types of assessment? So that we can adopt our strategies and we can find appropriate tools. Our goal should always match our approach to assessment. Let me now discuss the tips for assessment in distance modular learning. I just want to emphasize that these are only tips. Okay? What I will be discussing is not a rule for assessment. You can simply pick points you think can work for you and for your class or learners. So we have tip number 1, don't assess everything. You simply need to make decisions. What is nice to know and need to know. We have to remember that we don't have the luxury of time. Sometimes, or most of the time, we don't have enough time to cover everything. So, what can help us decide? Of course, our MELCs, or most essential learning competencies. So, wag na po nating dagdagan or bawasan pa what DepEd wants us to focus on in our curriculum. And then we have tip number 2, align it. This is connected to tip number 1. This is very simple, pero minsan dito po tayo nahihirapan. Ano po bang ibig sabihin nito? There must be a connection with the learning objectives, activities, and assessment. It is important to think of our objectives first. Ask ourselves, what do I want my students to know or to learn? Then we have to think of instructional strategies and ask ourselves, what kind of activities in and out of class will reinforce my learning objectives and prepare students for my assessment? Then we proceed to our assessment and ask ourselves, what kind of task will reveal whether my students have achieved the learning objectives I have identified? Okay? Even if we are doing modular learning, this is an important thing that we must consider when designing our assessment. We have to remember that we always have to align our assessment. And then we have tip number 3, ensure equity. Let us look at this picture. Do you think that there is an equity? Sa palagay po ba ninyo, yung assessment approach ay fair and impartial? You can share your insights po sa chat box. When creating an assessment, we need to always ask ourselves, how can I ensure that all students will experience success? Hindi po natin sinasabi na pare-parehas ang level ng success ng bata. Pero baka yung assessment po natin ay we are setting the students to fail. Yung tipong pahihirapan talaga natin para walang makapasa. So when we do our assessment, we have to consider our lowest common denominator. Isipin po natin, what do I know to all these students that can achieve with materials at hand, with the level of support I am able to provide, and with the time frame expected? For example, we do not assess or grade our students just because they have better access in the internet or better learning environment at home. Kawawa naman yung mga batang walang magagandang learning environment. One way to ensure that there is an equity is for us to differentiate. But remember that when we differentiate, we have to provide a baseline of understanding for all our students, and that should be common to all of them. Okay? Tip number 4, design assessment that applies knowledge. So our assessment should be authentic. Okay? Ano po ang ibig sabihin nito? We should design assessment that require application of what students have learned to a new situation, and that demands judgment to determine what information and skills are relevant and how they should be used. How can we say that our assessment are authentic? It should be relevant, and it should represent real-world problems or issues or experiences by the learners. It has to be meaningful para masabi po natin na authentic po siya. And then we have tip number 5, don't overload. Lahat po tayo may limit, lalo na po yung mga bata. That's why we just try to imagine If the students are required to complete multiple performance tasks across multiple discipline or class tests, ano po kayang mangyayari sa mga bata? It can create stress and it is very detrimental to their wellness and health. So what can we do? We can take these performance tasks, split them to shorter tasks or performance items, or tasks can be completed over a longer term rather than in one sitting para hindi po mahirapan ang mga bata. So we try to be very considerate and I think considerate naman tayo. Okay. Next is monitor progress and focus on feedback. Okay? Pwede po tayong gumamit ng mga guides and checkpoints. We can let our students know and remind them what they need to submit. When they need to submit, andyan po ang mga group chats natin, cellphone numbers, to check on them. We just have to utilize it properly. When it comes to feedback naman, sometimes we tend to neglect this part as teachers. Ito yung nakakalimutan natin. But remember, it is very important for us to communicate with our learners and parents. How can we do this? We can do this synchronously or asynchronously. Sometimes the platform that we are using can help us to do this, like our group chats, if we have our FB groups, cell phone numbers, mga yan, or simply we can just visit them at home. Whatever tool, application, platform, or ways we are using to address this, we should always remember that feedback should be tangible, transparent, actionable, user-friendly, timely, ongoing, and the last one should be consistent. Next tip, we have to leverage technology. Okay? Yes, technology must be used to its maximum advantage. However, we must not forget that when we speak of technology, equity exists. We know that many students do not have access to technologies and some strategies may not apply. We need to know or we need to show consideration sa lahat ng mga learners po natin. We have to balance leveraging technology while maintaining equity. And also, we have to be careful focusing too much on technology. We have to keep in mind that pedagogy is our priority over technology. Our pedagogy should not suffer. And the last one, teach academic honesty. We need to acknowledge that there's no foolproof way to ensure academic honesty. At okay lang po yan. Instead of using deficit-based approach assessment or expecting the student will cheat, we need to have an asset-based approach where we trust them to do the right thing and engage them in teachable moments around academic honesty. Kasi po teachers, yung expectations po natin really matter. We have to emphasize to our students. They have to realize that they are the ones who are missing the opportunity to learn when they cheat. Okay? Now, let us discuss strategies we can use to assess modular distance learning. And in these strategies, we can integrate our own creativity. First, we have our performance test. This is also known as authentic or alternative assessment. Ano po ba yung performance task? A performance task is any learning activity or assessment that asks students to perform or to demonstrate their knowledge, understanding, and proficiency. Performance tasks yield a tangible product and performance that serves as evidence of learning. In a performance task, we allow our learners to apply their learning in context. It calls for application of knowledge, skills. It is not just all about recognition. It can also be used as a formative or summative assessment tool. Second, we have our self-assessment. Ito yung isang pinakita ni Madam Mercy. We can use this to help our students chart their own progress, and this could help us to scaffold our students' learning process. And the third one, we have our learning journals. This is an effective way in building our students their metacognitive skills, their ability to think about thinking. Students can write about their challenges for the week, their learnings, and their plan. They could reflect with their experiences within the week. They could also write with their success stories, their high point within the week. They can also write new concepts that they're able to understood, their interesting pieces of knowledge, and problems that they're able to overcome. They could also write visual diaries. They can paint, draw, that is inspired by their learning during that week. They can also write their questions. They can write 3 questions every day, or they could have independent inquiry. What is important is we will use this journal entry to inform future learning activities for our individual students and, of course, for us to improve our teaching strategies. And then we have, fourth, we have our portfolios. Another good way to assess our student is by using portfolios. What is a portfolio? A portfolio is a collection of a students' work that display their mastery of a skill of the task and expression. It also exhibits our students' efforts, progress, and achievements in one or more areas. And then we have our peer assessment. Peer assessment or peer feedback helps students learn while providing us, teacher, with formative insights into the progress of all involved. They have to communicate their feedback in a structured way. How do we guide our students to do peer assessment? It is important that we model what helpful feedback looks like. Magbigay po tayo ng sample sa mga bata. Let us provide exemplars, feedback that is specific, constructive, and detailed. Then let's make sure that we monitor the comment of each student, how they are able to receive it, so that we could be informed of each of our students' individual progress. Peer feedback should always take the written form. Bakit? Kasi mas nagiging considerate ang ating mga students if they are committed to writing a written feedback. Mm-mm. I will agree with that. Now that we have discussed the tips and strategies for distance modular learning, the next question is, what are the tools that we can use to execute those approaches? Okay? We need tools that we can use and our students can use. Pwede natin gamitin, pwede rin gamitin ng mga students natin. Okay? Hindi yung tayo lang yung pwedeng gumamit nun. There's no balance at all. There are so many tools that we can use, but we should only at least choose 3 to 5 tools that we think is best for us and for the learners. Sabi nga nila, less is more. Hindi mo naman pwedeng gamitin lahat ng tools that is provided by DepEd. Okay. Bakit kailangan nating mag-focus sa konti? Because that will allow our students to experience the tools that they are able to use or used to using while ensuring that checking for learnings doesn't get boring. Let us be reminded that the end goal of our assessment is better learning. Okay? Let us make our assessment very useful. To conclude this talk, I would like to emphasize that there is no best way to assess distance modular learners. Each assessment strategies have their own pros and cons. What is important is that we have a balanced approach. When designing what assessment strategy to use, we need to consider the issues such as content, context, and audience. What is important is that we have a clear and defined objectives, strategies, and appropriate assessment tool. I hope this give all of us an additional insight to help you decide what is the best assessment approach or method you are going to use. Okay? But before I end this session, I just want to share two sayings. The real goal of classroom assessment is to improve student performance, not merely audit it. Okay? And the second one is that teaching will always be a work of art. Okay? Thank you for listening po. Have a great day ahead.